Good afternoon, everyone. It is 4 p.m. in London, and it is the 13th of October today, 2020. Welcome to Food Travel Talk TV, a monthly talk show brought to you by the World Food Travel Association, the world's leading authority on food and beverage tourism. Food Travel Talk TV was created by and for the world's culinary travel trade. Its goal is to inspire us all with ways to help us do business better. Each month, we invite industry thought leaders, opinion makers, and trendsetters to discuss important topics for our industry's benefit. My name is Eric Wolf, and I'll be your host today for our October 2020 episode. This month's topic is keeping authenticity authentic in food tourism. And I'd like to introduce our guest speakers. Janet Crick, founder of Jamaica Culinary Tours,
Hi, everyone.
and Lyra Spang, who is founder of Taste Belize Tours.
Hello, everybody.
We are using a bespoke webinar system, so Zoom rules don't apply here. Any handouts, links, and polls shared in the live session are for live guests only. If you're watching this recording after the air date, we're sorry, but you will not be able to access those materials. Feel free to post your questions at any time in the chat window. We will reserve the last 20 minutes or so for our guests to answer your questions. And now I'd like to set the tone for today's episode. Authenticity is consistently one of the most demanded types of culinary experiences by travelers, yet there are plenty of differing opinions about what is actually authentic. And in fact, the term authentic has become so overused, it has ceased to hold much marketing value among food-loving consumers. Some people think certain fusion combinations are authentic because of what they were used to when they were raised, and in other situations, some dishes like tikka masala in the UK are authentic to the UK, but not India. The notion of authenticity is confusing at best. What is a food-loving traveler to do? Today, we aim to discuss authenticity in food and beverage experiences for travelers and hopefully end up with some ideas or guidelines that practitioners in our industry can use in their own product development and marketing initiatives. So, with that said, I would like to ask both of our lovely guests today, what does authenticity mean to you when we talk about food and beverage? Who'd like to go first?
Go ahead, Janet, please.
Uh, okay. For me, authenticity, I think I'd say it's two prongs. The first prong is when you look at the word authentic, obviously everybody knows it means real, it means genuine. So for when I think of authentic food, I'm thinking of the whole history behind the food, the origin, the roots. Where it's coming from, how it came into our cuisine, into our culture, and as a result of that, what it says about the identity of that culture. So, since I'm in Jamaica, let's talk about a particular Jamaican food, saltfish, which is part of our national dish, ackee and saltfish. And Lyra would be very familiar with saltfish because it's throughout the Caribbean and Latin America very widely used, but that was introduced into our cuisine from the all the way back to the plantation era, when the plantation owners would import it from Vancouver in Canada as a means of stretching the diet of the enslaved because they weren't really given much meat kind. So now you find that has come down through the ages, and it is it's almost a staple not only in Jamaica, but as I said, in many other Caribbean countries. So when you have a plate of saltfish, paired with the ackee if you like, when you have something like the bami with that, which is a flatbread made from cassava, and that was introduced into our cuisine by the Tainos, the original inhabitants of the island centuries ago. When you look at that, that's authentic, and it carries all of that history, all of that tradition with it. So I think that's one meaning of authentic for me. The second prong would be when you say authenticity, you're talking about authenticity of taste, of place, and of method, how you prepare it. The taste, are there certain ingredients that if you take jerk chicken, for example, or jerk, which Jamaica is well renowned for, but many people think that jerk is spicy and therefore just throw pepper on your chicken or your meat and good, you have jerk. No, the taste is comprised of certain key element ingredients. that if that's not in it, with the Scotch bonnet pepper being one, is it really authentic jerk? So I think when you say authentic, it's a whole lot packed into that word that you have to unpack. It's not just one thing.
Have to
But
unpack
it's
it
a
all like that.
mouthful.
Lyra, what's authenticity mean to you?
That's really a loaded question for anthropologists, and I am an anthropologist. We spend years unpacking the idea of authenticity. There are so many papers about that, a lot of research about it. There's a really great idea in anthropology about the front stage and the back stage of a tourism experience, with the argument that really there's going to be certain effects from the tourism experience on how things are done, no matter what. The question is, does that render an activity or a food inauthentic simply because it may have been changed a little bit, or the timeline altered, or certain aspects altered to make it more guest friendly? So authenticity to me, it's a really contested term, and I think that it's overused. Personally, I would say that when most people talk about authenticity, they're actually talking about tradition. They're talking about things that have been done for a long period of time in a certain way over and over again. So when we're talking about authenticity in food, usually people are talking about dishes, ingredients, methods of preparation, flavor combinations that have been used for generations by a culture, by a specific community in a specific geographic location, or within the society of a specific country. The thing about that interpretation is it doesn't allow much room for innovation and change. And culture is actually all about change. They are not static. And a lot of folks think about culture as something where you try to preserve culture. That means you try to keep it from changing at all. That's not a realistic way of thinking about culture. As far as the anthropologists, we don't look at that as being the reason for culture to exist. Culture exists to help us to adapt to changing times. So that means food culture will inevitably change, and people experiment, people innovate. And so where is that line between saying, okay, this is authentic, but also it's innovative? Can you be innovative and authentic at the same time? And I would argue that we define authenticity too narrowly. We don't allow much elbow room for experimentation and innovation. And that sometimes when we're clinging to only keeping traditional recipes without any experimentation, any innovation, any change, and those are the only recipes that are allowed to be called authentic, we kind of restrict ourselves a little bit. So for me personally, I think the focus with authenticity should really be on who's making this food, and where is the message of the food coming from. Is this an expression of identity for a culture, for a society, for a country? So even if it is innovative, even if you are using a different ingredient or you're trying a different flavor combination, there may be certain things about the way it's presented or the message behind it that will still allow it to be authentic, because it ties into that identity and that expression of self and that expression of a specific culture, a specific society, but allowing it to change, evolve, and be creative. That's the definition I
That's
would like to see, but it's not the usual definition.
no, and try to say that quickly on a tour, right? Well, I think you ladies both have very interesting perspectives, and I think you've both together, the sum of what you both said has really, that those are the issues in authenticity right now. Uh-oh, I think we've lost Lyra in the middle of her thunderstorm there. I'm sure she'll be back soon.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But I think that there's a food historian in Ireland by the name of John Mulcahy, and I was at a conference a couple of years ago where John was speaking, and he said that a cuisine changes on average about every 80 years. So the food that we're eating now in 2020 is not the same food that was being eaten in 1940 in the UK or United States or whatever. And how do you think, I mean, yes, cuisines need to change, right? I mean, ultimately, French cuisine came from Italian cuisine, and now today it's a completely distinct cuisine in and of itself. So if we're talking about allowing cuisines to change and evolve, maybe a new ingredient is starting to be grown in your country, or maybe something like bananas. What if bananas go extinct and you can't make things with bananas anymore? What do you do instead? So how do you feel, Janet, about letting cuisines evolve?
I tend to agree with Lara that culture is not static. And so that's, I would say the same for cuisine. And you really do have to let them evolve, and you do have to let them grow, and you do have to experiment a bit. So what, I mean, I would slightly disagree with that, with saying that cuisine changes every 80 years, meaning that I don't think if you look at Jamaica 80 years from now, I would still expect to see certain elements of what we are eating today. But as you said, it may not look identical to what we have. But I think you have to allow that room for flexibility and for change and for experimentation. So I'm excited by what I see Jamaican chefs are doing with our cuisine. And I don't necessarily call it inauthentic, because I think it still carries a thread from the original. So, for example, if you take breadfruit, which some people might be familiar with in Latin America, I think they call it pan de fruta, but it's like a starch, and we normally boil it or roast it and have it as a side. Breadfruit is coming back centuries, but now I see where they're using it as a taco shell. Okay, now tacos is not something that is traditional to Jamaica, but it's a very unique idea, and it's a different usage of the breadfruit, and there's so many different things. And I guess, no, I'm probably going to be bordering a bit on fusion cooking. So when you take something like curry goat, which is very traditional to Jamaica, and you talk about curry goat ravioli, which some chefs have done. Is that truly, that's not authentic Jamaican cuisine? But perhaps in 80 years' time, it might be. But it started out as a fusion. So yes, I think you really need to allow for that space for cuisines, traditions to evolve, to grow, um, and just be dynamic, because it's not static.
Yeah. No, I think I hear what you're saying, and I think that the world that we live in now, we have to allow for innovation. So do you think that we should stop using the word authentic in food tourism marketing?
I don't think so. As I said, for me, it still carries a particular meaning. Lyra said it in her introductory remarks that perhaps when we say authentic, people really mean traditional. So maybe if we stop using it, it might be to switch to traditional. But I think the word means different things to different people. So I wouldn't want to ban the word per se, because I think for some people it carries that sentiment, it carries that nostalgia. If you think of Jamaicans in the diaspora who live overseas, depending on where they live, if you live in certain parts of the United States or Canada, it's very easy to get Jamaican food. But for a lot of Jamaicans, it's not really authentic unless we have it yard style, the way it's cooked at home in Jamaica. For some people, it might be even cooking it over a coal fire outside. So when they come home to Jamaica on holidays, what they're looking for is authentic, right? They would still want to use that word because it carries that nostalgia with it. So I don't know if it is a word that we should drop from food tourism, but I think we should accept that it means different things to different people. I don't know how Lyra, from an anthropologist standpoint, feels about that.
Yeah, but tell us.
I mean, I completely agree with that. In Belize, we have a culture day in the primary schools, and all the children are taught about the different cultures because we are a very diverse country. And people dress up in the cultural clothes, and they bring a dish of the cultural food, which usually their mom is the one making it. But it kind of creates this idea that, okay, the Maya, their cultural food is this dish. The Garifuna, their cultural food is this dish. The Creole, their cultural food is this dish. And that very much oversimplifies. It's great for the kids, and it helps to create a sense of national and cultural pride, which is what we believe in Belize, that you can have both. But it kind of oversimplifies the idea of, what is this cultural cuisine and what you can do with it. So I think there's a lot of different definitions. I don't think we should ban the word, but we need to be careful with it, knowing that it means different things to different people. And I also want to say that I try not to use the term a lot. On our website, in our advertising, I notice there are other ways to talk about authenticity, to talk about maintaining that thread of connection to the past, present, and future without using the word authentic. So I actually try not to use it very much because I believe it's overused and misunderstood. Not that I ban it personally. If someone says to me, oh, this is so authentic, I'll say, yes, this is a dish that has been made for, a long period of time that uses ingredients from this area. I think what you said, Janet, about there being a thread that connects, it's really a narrative, a culinary narrative connecting the past, the present, and the future. And of course, that narrative is going to change. And I find with our guests, some people are obsessed with authenticity, but not everybody. And especially with younger educated guests, there's kind of a postmodern approach to experimenting with food. There's a playfulness, like let's break the boundaries. Let's see what if we stick these two things together. Let's play around. And that doesn't render it inauthentic. We're not worried about that. What we're interested in seeing is innovation. We go to another country, in our country, we see innovation with our chefs. Now we're in Belize or in Jamaica. We're fascinated to hear about, the goat curry ravioli, because that's fun, that's exciting, it's interesting. You're bringing those authentic flavors and you're presenting it in a different form. And so you still have that narrative thread connecting to the culinary heritage, to the past, but you're playing with it. You're being playful and you're being creative. And I think a lot of our guests here in Belize, I see less and less of them really like asking for and talking about authenticity. They might use the word traditional more. And I really do think with younger people under 35 and under, there's less focus on authenticity for a lot of them. And there's more focus just on being creative with your culinary heritage. So you have this heritage, certain ingredients, certain flavor combinations, certain techniques of cooking. Like you say, over the fire hearth in the yard. In Belize, we say all food cooked on the wood burning fire hearth, that is the best food. So those are things that then can be played with. You could make that ravioli over the fire hearth. Then what? Is it authentic? Is it not authentic? These are the interesting dividing lines. So I think being more playful about it is a lot of fun, and that our guests, at least on my end, our guests really enjoy that creativity. And as long as they can still see that thread, like connecting to the past and coming into the future. So it's not like you're making a complete break with your culinary heritage. You are fully embracing your culinary heritage. And just like Picasso did with all his painting techniques, he learned the classics, and then he did something completely different with it, but drawing on that knowledge. So that's what today and innovative cooks can do, and we can bring our guests to experience that, as well as more traditional renditions of dishes that have stayed for many, many generations. So I think both, having both experiences in a culinary tour is a lot of fun. Let's eat the traditional version, and then let's have the ravioli. This is fun. This is a playful experience, and you're also learning about how this culinary heritage is dynamic and delicious.
I totally agree with that, because I think Lara hit upon two good words. It's meant to be playful and creative, and food is meant to be that. It's meant to be fun. an enjoyable experience. So you don't want to get so bogged down with the rituals and what's right and what's wrong and what's authentic and what's inauthentic, that you don't get a chance to enjoy it. So I fully agree with her that you know, when you present it as food tourism, or when you're in the field of food tourism, you want to strike the balance between fun and creative and evolving and innovation, as well as the traditional. And I think there's space for both, because you can, the traditional is telling the story, telling the culinary narrative, as you rightly said, Lyra. Um, and then there is that scope for, well, what can we do with it? And as you were speaking, I was remembering one of the dishes that one of our great chefs serves on one of our tours, and this is the Oxtail Mania. So oxtail is again something that goes back centuries to the era of the plantation era, and this is when the enslaved would use the discarded bits of meat that the plantation owners didn't want. So they literally would discard the oxtail, and then the slaves would take that discarded meat and, you know, get very innovative and creative with it. So you realize that creativity is coming back centuries. And they would stew it down with beans and so on. And that's how we normally eat oxtail, with beans and rice, some kind of rice, whether it's rice and peas or white rice. And what they do at this restaurant is they do Oxtail Mania. That's the name of the dish. And that is stuffed into a cocoa bread, which is another traditional type of bread. So that's changing it somewhat, but it's making it fun. It's making it creative. It's making it new. It's adding a new dimension to it, but it's still a link to the original. So when we serve that dish to our guests, it allows us to tell two stories: the story of where the oxtail is coming from, the story of where the cocoa bread is coming from, and then we put all of that together into one nice package. And it's fun, it's playful, it's creative, it's new. So I really think that when you're presenting food tourism, that's what it needs to be about. Not something that's dogmatic, but something that's fun and that allows the visitor to identify with the culture that he or she is in. And you can do that in many, many different ways.
You know, Janet, you were talking earlier about Caribbean people living in the States or Canada or even the UK. And, oh no, I think you said specifically Jamaican people, and how things don't necessarily taste the same to them, and they want to come home to Jamaica to try
Mhm.
have the authentic food again. And I think what is missing outside of the local areas is the terroir of the food. So if you're in Canada or the States or the UK and you're cooking Jamaican food, and you might follow the exact same recipe you always cooked with at home back in Jamaica, you use the same spices, everything's the same, but it doesn't taste the same. And why is that? And that's the terroir. So it's the climate, it's the water, it's the pollen. So whatever ingredients you're using, whether they're meats or fruits and vegetables, they were brought up with different everything, different water, different pollen, all of that stuff, which gives a different flavor. So when you make the dish that you knew from home and something's not quite right and you can't put your finger on it, and I would say it's the terroir has changed.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's something that we don't think about consciously until it happens to you and you do it somewhere else and it's just not quite the same. So I think that's what I refer to it as nostalgia. I think that's what the nostalgia is about. And also, never discount the memories that go with it. So sometimes you're recreating a dish that your mother cooks for you back home in Jamaica or back home in Belize or wherever your homeland is. And just the fact that it's not your mother doing it in the kitchen that you grew up in, doing it the way she did, not using a recipe, but saying, I'm putting a sprinkle of this and a dash of that. Sometimes you just can't recreate that in another environment. There's always going to be that element missing. So yes, I'd agree with you.
Hmm. Um, I would like to talk a little bit about the idea of dumbing down a dish for visitors. And this question was posed to me. I was doing an interview for a Malaysian television show, and they asked me this question. They said, should we change some of our dishes, our typical classic dishes for visitors. Sometimes things are too spicy for them, or in some of the Southeast Asian countries, the fish sauce can be too strong for some people and they don't like the stinkiness of it. Or sometimes there are certain ingredients that some people won't want to eat, like guinea pig or rat, or in some parts of Asia, dog and cat. I hate to say it, but it happens. So, do you think that we should look at dumbing down food, or should we have a version of food that's kind of visitor safe, or is that going against everything that food tourism is about?
Well, it brings us back to that word authentic, which is where we started. Are you presenting an authentic picture or not? For me, I never like to dumb down anything. I like to give you the realistic picture, but I like to give people choices. Because again, coming back to what I said, you want it to be fun, you want it to be exciting for people. So you don't want to present them with a lot of options where they're going to go, oh, no, I don't like that, and so on, or it's too hot or it's too spicy. So I think you can do both. You can present what is authentic, what is traditional, this is how we traditionally eat it, but you can present choices along with it. And so you give your guests the option, and it's really up to them how much they want to delve into it. I have friends, I have relatives who we call them foodies rather than foodies because they're very picky about food. Does that mean that they don't like food or that they should be forced to have it the way we have it? No, of course not. And when I traveled, I like to explore as much as possible, but then there are certain limits for me. I lived in Japan for 2 years. I never ate, well, I shouldn't say I never ate octopus. I tried it once. It was too rubbery, and I thought, no, I'm just not going to do this. But I enjoyed so many other aspects of the cuisine. So I think you can really give people the choice. When I visited Thailand, I love Thai food, but it's really, really super hot. And I like the fact that they give me the option. Would you like the mild version or would you like the very hot, which would be the traditional way of it? I go with the mild version because I can't manage a lot of heat on my food. So giving people a choice, but yet still presenting them with what the original, traditional, authentic, whichever word we're going with, what that looks like, I think gives a balanced, fair picture, and it makes people feel comfortable if they're not forced to think I'm going to go on this tour and I'm not going to be able to eat anything.
Lyra, should we have a dumbed down version of food that's visitor safe?
That's insulting to our guests, I think. We get a lot of people on our tours who are not self-proclaimed foodies. They don't spend all their money and effort on exploring different kinds of food because we do chocolate tours, and chocolate tours appeal to a really wide range of people. So we'll get, for example, a common situation because we have such spectacular fly fishing where I am. You'll have some couples and it'll end up being a gender divided experience. The men went out fly fishing and the women are like, oh, let's do that chocolate thing. Now, they're not necessarily foodies on the broad spectrum. They may not be particularly adventurous eaters, but they like chocolate and they want to do something today. And so they go on a chocolate tour with me. And so we have some guests that are enthusiastic, food lovers, very adventurous, and they want to try different things. And then we have other guests that are not in that. That's really not something that's that important to them. They're on a specific tour because of a specific food, like the chocolate tour. And that's what they're interested in. And they don't want to have iguana for lunch along the way. And so I don't dumb it down. If we're going to have something, we're going to have it. And you're going to know what you're getting into in advance, and you can make your choice about that. Now, that said, not everybody is up for the challenge when it comes to some of the more unusual dishes. So if I was doing, say, a walking food tour in our community, I'm not going to only serve them things that kind of I know, because I know who my guests are, that is going to push their boundaries of comfort for what they're eating. I might have one or two things that will do that. And then other things that are equally, quote unquote, authentic, but that may be a little more approachable. But certain things we're not going to dumb it down. If you want to have a whole fried fish, we're not taking the head off before we bring it to the table. This is how it's served. This is how we eat it. Maybe this is the first time that you're eating with your hands. We're going to encourage you to eat with your hands. As the guide, we lead the way, so we show you, and we encourage you to try. And even if you've never done it before, I have plenty of guests who are not particularly adventurous, and we get them to do things that they probably would never do on their own. And that's part of the experience of going on a tour, is to encourage people to try something new. And then afterwards, they're all excited. They're like, oh, I've never done that, and it was really good. And, they feel proud of themselves and they enjoyed it.
I think that's one of the exciting things of being a food-loving traveler is this idea of discovery. And there are going to be some places that just serve the same way they've always served it. They don't dumb down anything. And then they're going to be the places that serve the light version of local foods, with light on the chili, light on the fish sauce, no bull testicles or whatever the unusual ingredient is. And it's up to the food loving traveler to discover those things on their own. And you can look at bloggers, you can look at websites, you can look at TripAdvisor, you can talk to people, you can visit your websites. You guys both have great websites, and try and get a picture of things. But I think it's really up to the visitors to, and that's, I guess, what you guys do as well. You really help people to understand what is authentic, whether we want to use that word or not, and then let people go off later, and maybe they can go back to the bakery that they really liked, or they can go back to the seafood place that they really liked and try some more dishes.
Yeah,
and I
that's
think someone commented in the written comments here.
What was that,
Something
Lyra?
I thought was really important, which is that our guests are more and more educated often about the foods they're about to try, because they can Google search all of it. And no, not all of the unique foods of the world are online, but there is more and more information out there. So they might know, oh, is this jerk, chicken going to be cooked on a grill made out of allspice poles or not? Because I read this thing and this thing online. So, now, and they can Google search what you tell them. So accuracy is important. Now, whether they take that as authentic or not is up to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you ladies both are quite accomplished, and I was saving the golden nugget for the middle of the show because I didn't want to get people right at the beginning and then they would log off. But Janet, you won our 2018 Food Trekking Awards because of the quality of your application. And could you tell people listening today what it was about your application that won that award? Because I think that was the essence of what you do, was really what pushed you over the winning line or the finish line there.
What I'd almost say, you as the judges would have to tell us that. But when we made the application, we were very authentic in just presenting what it is that we have done, or well, at the time, what we had done for the past 5 years, which is to try to depict the real Jamaica, if you will, through our food. And as I've said, our culinary tours, that's what we do. We tell the story of Jamaica through the food. We bring you into our culture and bring you in so that you understand the people, you understand our journey, you understand where we're coming from, and why all of that tradition, why all of that history really plays out in what we put on our food, on our table every day, and in what you buy at the cook shops on the street and so on. So that's what we've tried to do. We definitely, as I say, do not dumb it down. There is under the routes that we travel and the foods that we taste, there's nothing that is particularly offensive, I would say, typical offensive products. But we give it to you as it is. If the patty is spicy, it's spicy. The only adaptation we make is and it's not really an adaptation, many restaurants do that. We'll present the jerk, and you can have the sauce on the side, so you can decide how much pepper you want or not. But everything that we do is authentic, and it's genuine, and it's the way, and we take people to the places that we go to. So we're taking you down a little alley that the average person might look at that and say, I'm not going down there. We're going down there because we know the guys down there. They're going to chop the coconut right in front of you, open it up for you. You're going to drink from it. And so for us, that's what Jamaica is. Because we're really just trying to show you, this is how we live every day. This is what we eat. This is how we chat and laugh with one another when we eat. These are the people that we see when we go to our favorite bakery or we stop by the jerk pit, you know. So it's very natural, and I am assuming that that is what pushed us over the edge in terms of our application, because it's we put our passion into it, and it's a passion that shines through, and the realness
Well, a lot of
of
the features of your application were things that you both identified in your explanation of authenticity. So things like the storytelling, the tradition, the history, the stories that can be told about something and shared later. And it was like a case study of the best possible culinary tour company because of what you do. And Lyra, I would like to switch the conversation to you now. Talk about being an authority. This is Lyra's book here, and I have just started to get into it. This is a magnum opus. It is really extremely thorough. Can you tell us a little bit about what maybe like the top 2 or 3 things that you found out about in researching your own cuisine that the visitor would want to know about from your book here?
Well, one of the things, and I imagine a little bit of the same for Jamaica. Belize is a young country as an independent nation, even younger than Jamaica. We only gained our independence in 1981 from England. And so the idea of a national cuisine is in evolution at this time. So one of the key things that I was researching for this book was to look at whose cuisine is being represented as the national cuisine, because in Belize, we are a very diverse country. We have 3 different Maya indigenous groups. We have the Creole population, the mixture of European and African ancestry. We have different immigrant groups. We have East Indian descent people. We have Chinese descent people. We have North American immigrant descent people. We have people descended from Confederate sugarcane planters that moved here after the American Civil War. We have Mennonites. We have many different groups and different foods as a result. And so when we talk about what is Belizean food, whose food are we talking about out of all these many different groups? Because the food in Mennonite food and Maya food completely different.
We see that a lot.
And so that was one of the things we were looking at, the power, the cultural politics of national cuisine. Whose cultures are being represented on that national platform? Whose cultures are being exported to the rest of the world and saying, this is Belizean food? And it depends on the colonial history, who had the power. Of course, England had the power. Then England left. Who stepped into that? The Creole people. So Creole food has been given more power than the other cultural groups to represent Belize at a national level and abroad. Now, that said, the Creole are not actually the numerical majority in Belize today. So it's an interesting situation, and it is also reflective of political power. So there's a lot of dynamics there when we talk about national cuisine. It's not just about food, it's about power. It's a heavy topic. And so as a country, we in Belize, we say, Allah Wida one. And that means all of us are one. And it's a very nice saying, but when you start to really dig into it, you find that we don't actually, most of us don't actually think quite as openly as that saying would assume. And that is reflected, again, in whose food is getting represented at that national and international level. So that's something any country you go to, when you're like, oh, what is, Belgian cuisine? What is South African food? What is Thai food? Every country has cultural diversity. Well, almost all that I've been to. And you will find that whose food is getting represented often reflects the political situation and the power dynamics within that country. So that's something interesting to look at when you're digging into food. And then I think that the other key point from that book is that tourism can provide incentive and impetus for culinary innovation. So in Belize, we have a big tourism sector, at least we did until a few months ago. And that sector kind of drives evolution and innovation in cuisine to a certain extent. But at the same time, it also kind of reinforces this generic tropical hotel food that, let's put a slice of pineapple on this, add some jalapenos to that, and now it's, this is tropical, but it's not Belizean. So there's a lot of opportunity for Belizean chefs and Belizean entrepreneurs to really represent our food, our culinary narrative in Belize, and to represent that to the rest of the world. And so instead of just allowing the same generic tropical hotel experience to happen, how can we kind of grab a hold of the tourism industry and use that as a vehicle to get our culinary story out there to the rest of the world? Otherwise, we're just another cheeseburger in paradise, and I don't think we want that.
Yeah. Well, I've shared the links for both of you. Lyra, I've shared your book, and I've shared Janet's website as well. And I would encourage anyone here today to visit both of your resources. Another resource that I'd like to offer to our audience while you're thinking about your questions for our speakers is our handouts. And so for every show, we always put together some articles or videos that we have found that might be interesting to you. We've just shared that, so go ahead and click on that if that is something that you think might be of interest and help to you. And go ahead and please do type in your questions for Lyra and Janet in the chat box there, and we'll get to those in just a minute. I'd like to discuss this idea of fear when we travel and we're looking forward to trying a new food, and it could be authentic, but it's not something we're used to. And Lyra, you were talking about hotel breakfasts, and I was having a conversation yesterday with a culinary tourist guide in South Africa, and she says she gets to the hotel early to meet her guests for breakfasts in the hotel to introduce them to different South African foods, because otherwise they wouldn't try them because they don't know them. So there's that apprehension, that fear there. So what do either of you do on your tours with visitors who you can tell have some trepidation about trying the local food? They want something safe, and it's just a little too authentic for them. How do you handle that?
Janet?
Well, we don't get that a whole lot. As I said, the routes that we cover and the food that we serve, it's usually pretty safe. I think the biggest challenge sometimes is the spiciness or so on. But we have things, for example, something as simple that we as Jamaicans take for granted, the coconut jelly, which can have different consistency. So when it's thick and like a jelly, it's fine. But when it's watery and runny, people sort of go, "Oh, that doesn't look like something I want to go down my throat." And really, as I said earlier, I think it's about the comfort zone. So you want to encourage them to try, but it's never supposed to be this feeling that, wow, if you don't try this, you haven't really been to Jamaica or you haven't really experienced Jamaican food. So, I mean, we often do it ourselves. We drink it, we eat it, or we take a bite of it or something. And we say, see, really, it's very good. Or, sometimes people are traveling in a group and one member of the group will try it and they're like, no, this is not bad. You should try it. But it's, as I said, it's really not something that you should force. If you have done the narrative, I think you're partway there. They know what it is. They understand how it was introduced into the cuisine or why it's important to your culture and to your culinary landscape. And after that, it's a matter of choice. So that's my take on it.
Lyra?
Well, we do a culinary walking tour, and we a lot of street food. And this is an area where some travelers to foreign countries get a little unsure, because these are oftentimes they're stands, or in Belize, we'll often have things like out of a 5-gallon plastic bucket in an ice chest on the side of the road. People don't even know what's in there. They would never even notice it if they were moving around on their own. And that's why we're here to give them that experience. Sometimes they're a little apprehensive because they're concerned about things like hygiene and cleanliness. And these are folks that are not, your adventurous foodie type. These are people that are interested in food, but their interest in food usually is at a sit-down restaurant. And we want them to try some of the best food in Belize. Some of the best food in Belize comes out of a 5-gallon bucket on the side of the road. So they have to kind of break their preconceptions of where good food resides. Does good food have to reside in a sit-down restaurant with a good waiter and a nice wine list? No. Some of the best food in Belize comes out of home kitchens and is sold, off a little rickety table on the side of the street. Yeah. And so that experience is what we want our guests to have, is to kind of break those preconceptions, get beyond that fear. And what Janet said, exactly, you're the guide, you have to lead the way. So you need to show them and you need to eat the food with them. One experience I remember, we had the opportunity for some guests on that walking tour to try something called dalawap. Dalawap is where you take the neck, back, and foot of the chicken and you deep fry it. And it's put in a paper bag with sliced jalapenos, minced up a little bit, and with some ketchup and hot sauce. And with usually it will be like plantain chips in there as well. So you basically have chicken and chips in a little paper bag, and it costs $1. And you can also get the $3 wap, but the dollar wap is, the classic. This is real Belizean street food. This is something, kids will grab, somebody will just get a little snack. This is for people who want to chew on the bone. You're chewing up everything and then you throw the chewed up bits of bone back in your bag, throw that in the trash, and you're done.
Give me that.
And it's spicy, and it has a chicken foot in there, right? So those are two things that people could be a little intimidated by. So of course I'm the one who's going to eat the chicken foot first, right? So show them first off, how do you eat a chicken foot? And why do you eat a chicken foot? Let's talk about what would be the reason for eating a chicken foot, since you don't do it in your culture, and trying it out. So people tried it. I don't think anybody would go back on their own and get it on their own, just because it was too far out an experience for them. When they want meat, they want lots of meat and little or no bone from their background. And here in Belize, we want the bone in, because we know bone equals flavor, and that's how we think about it. And so those bits that have the cartilage and the gristle and the different textures and flavors, we like those. So it was for them an experience that makes a story. They'll talk about it. They'll be like, oh, remember when we went on that tour and they had the fried chicken foot, and then it will be a fun memory for them, and they probably won't ever eat it again. But they were adventurous, and they can feel proud of that and carry that home with them, and that's fine. They don't have to like everything that we eat on the tour. So we will push them a little bit to at least try, at least give it a try. You don't have to like it. And that's what I tell people too. You don't have to lie to me if you don't like it. That's totally fine. You're not going to like everything. That's, this is about exploring. Not everything might be to your taste.
Well, we have a question here from Francesc in Girona, Spain, and he is asking, what do you think is less authentic, a Spanish traditional dish cooked by a foreign cook in Spain, or the same dish cooked by a Spanish cook in a foreign country?
Lyra, you want to try that one?
I mean, that the answer to that could go on for hours. Because that goes right to the heart of how do we define authenticity. And again, that can be a very personal thing. I guess I would answer the question with a question. Is the Spanish cook cooking this traditional Spanish dish in a foreign country able to get all the ingredients that they are required to cook it in what is considered the traditional way? Or are they having to make substitutions because they can't get this or they can't get that? Here in Belize, it would be hard to get all the ingredients for a good paella, simply because some of the key flavor compounds are very difficult to find, for example. This is not a land of olives and olive oil. This is not, you want good ham, you're not going to find it here. So if the Spanish cook was in Belize, some traditional dishes would be kind of hard to do. So, but I think what it comes down to, you're asking, does it matter what country they're cooking in? And can somebody who is not Spanish cook a traditional dish, a traditional Spanish dish that's been cooked a certain way for generations by Spanish people? Is it authentic if they cook it? That is a loaded question, because that brings you back to the idea of identity and who is allowed to cook the food. And that can be a really loaded question in some parts of the world, depending on who it is. Even me talking about authenticity in Belizean food, because here in Belize, someone with blue eyes and light skin is unusual. My parents met in Belize City, they immigrated to Belize. And then my brother and I are children of immigrants. And so the idea of who is a real Spanish person, who is a real Belizean, who is allowed to be authentic, it's not just about the food, it's about the people.
Yeah.
Who is Belizean, who is Spanish. So if we're saying we have a foreign cook there from China, let's say, and they live in Spain and they've been there for 40 years, and they're cooking a Spanish traditional dish, is it less authentic because they were not born in Spain because they look Chinese? That's a very, very good question. Some people would vehemently say there's no way that person could be considered an authentic cook of Spanish food. And other people would say, no, no, but they know all the techniques. They're doing it perfectly. They love this dish. They love this country. You know, just because they look Chinese and they grew up in another country doesn't change that.
Mm.
And that really comes down to interpreting models of national identity. So it depends on how open you are. If you have a very narrow definition of who is allowed to be part of your country and your cuisine, you will exclude a lot of people and a lot of options. So it's really up to the individual. Me, I favor a more open interpretation. I kind of have to be in who I am if I want to be part of my own country.
Janet, what's your thought?
No, I would fully agree with that because I have a similar experience in that my parents are both Barbadian, but they moved here to Jamaica. They lived here about 40 years before they both passed away. But I am born in Jamaica, so um, if when my parents were alive, when they cooked Jamaican food, did that mean it was not authentic? It was very authentic to me because I consider myself a Jamaican. I'm in a Jamaican home, even though I'm being raised by parents that are not Jamaican born. And similarly, I learned many recipes from them from Barbados. So if I of Barbadian lineage cook Barbadian food in my kitchen in Jamaica, does it mean that it's not authentic? And I think so. I think we're coming full circle back to the way we began this discussion that the word authentic really it is elastic. It is really hard to put a hard and fast boundary on what is authentic and what is not. And sometimes something Lyra said, it reminded me that sometimes too you might even border on cultural appropriation, which is a huge issue now. So, if I visit Spain and I like a dish that I had there, and I come back and I try to recreate it in my kitchen here in Jamaica, am I appropriating Spain's culture or cuisine? I don't think so. Am I cooking it authentically? I might try to do it as close as possible. So maybe it's not authentic, as Lyra said, if I can't get the exact ingredients grown in Spain, in that environment, it might not fully be authentic, but I'm not appropriating the culture either. And for me, it's really about an experience. I think as travelers and food travelers, what we're really trying to do is learn from each other, absorb, and recreate in our own home context. So, authentic, traditional, we know the stories and then we put our own flavor on it. We allow recipes to evolve and we allow ourselves to be innovative and creative. I think that's what it's all about. I would also say that one of the phrases that Lyra used earlier on, when she was talking about introducing some of her guests to street food and so on, it's about creating experiences. So when you become too rigid about it being whether it's authentic or not, you're overlooking or you're you're not allowing space for that creation of experiences. And for me, that's what food tourism is about. It's not whether you ate it or not, or you liked it or not. It's about, is it going to create a memorable experience for you?
That's truly it, and that's the core definition of food tourism: unique and memorable eating and drinking experiences. And it boils down to, do people like it or not? You know, so if you use less Scotch bonnet for the tourists who are coming, right? And if are people liking it? If so, then it's fine, and they can talk about that authentic Jamaican hot sauce that actually didn't have enough Scotch bonnet in it for most Jamaicans. But for
Mhm.
all the white folk from North America who thought, well, that's crazy, I'm not eating that. Um, well, we have one last question, and the question has to do with buying local food and cooking local food versus what is authentic. And this relates to a question earlier in the show about sustainability, and should a dish be served if it's an authentic dish, but there's a sustainability issue around it. So look at, for example, something like Chilean sea bass, which is being overfarmed and overfished, and it's not available in most of the world. But if it's a traditional dish, should that still be made? So what are your thoughts about the offering of traditional dishes or authentic dishes, but when they are taxing environmental resources, whether it's beef or seafood or whatever?
Lyra, I'll let you take that one.
Well, I mean, I do think about this because we have some things that are very, very local, very, very, seasonal, wild, harvested foods in Belize that could very, if they became a restaurant trend, we would be in trouble because there is not a lot of it. And for example, in Belize, we get a nice red snapper that has the roe. People will eat the roe. Now, if that roe suddenly became as popular as caviar, we wouldn't have any red snapper left because they would be eaten in egg form and we'd never get any baby fish. But when a fisherman in my village gets a snapper with the roe, that's like a big treat. Take that home and that gets cooked in a certain way and it's like a special thing. But I don't want to. I might tell my guests about it, but I'm not going to serve it to them. I'm not going to make an effort to get it for them to have it because I don't want to encourage it to be overconsumed because this is right now it's just a kind of an accidental treat. You got a snapper that you didn't know it had the roe. You're cleaning it, it has the roe. Oh, this is great. This is a special treat for me and my family. And let's just leave it like that because we know that that's not a sustainable thing to be offering to visitors. So there's a number of both plants and animals that fall into that category for me. Even if people got past their prejudice about eating iguana, which is delicious, we wouldn't want all of our visitors to eat iguana because there's already overhunting of iguana in certain parts of the country just for local consumption. So if you encourage it as something for the tourism market, and we in a normal year, a non-pandemic year, we get more tourists than our population of actual Belizeans. So imagine if they were all trying iguana. Oh, we have to try iguana on our trip. Well, then we wouldn't have any iguana left. So
Yeah.
we don't want to encourage them to get too creative with certain one of these, just because we're not farming iguana. It's all wild caught, and there's a limited amount.
Janet, what do you think about this issue of this controversial issue?
Yeah, I think that it's the way that tourism is evolving now. And when we talk about sustainable tourism, it's really about having a sense of responsibility for the destination and just really not over tapping the resources. And I mean, many countries grapple with it. It's not just in terms of the food and so on. It's just if you just have too many footprints in a particular tourist area, are you damaging the environment and so on? And I think it's just you may not have hard and fast rules, but you can certainly put measures in place that if you find that there's a particular food that is being depleted or a particular meat or fish, I think you have to put measures in place to try to safeguard that and create a balance, allowing people to enjoy it, but recognizing that you do have a responsibility for the environment around you. Because if we deplete all our resources, then, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we actually don't have a tourism product to present to visitors, or it will be significantly altered.
Janet, you've made a very interesting connection between sustainability and responsible tourism, and we often just make that shift naturally here within the association. We talk about responsible tourism. So in Lyra's example, maybe as a responsible tourist, I can hear about the iguana, but I'm not going to ask for it because I know it's becoming endangered, and it would be irresponsible for me to feel entitled to have that dish. So I think part of it's the education too, that either the visitors come prepared or they learn while they're there from you, the tour operators on site. But yeah, I was attending an environmental panel the other day, and they were talking about how all of the plastic that's going into the ocean is changing the water. It's making it more acidic it's increased acidity in the oceans by about 30%, which is making it difficult for the seafood like oysters and other mollusks to create their shells. So harvests are much lower than they used to be. Lobsters are not able to create their shells as easily. So a lot of seafood species are really struggling to survive in the ocean, which is just mind-boggling to me. And I don't know. I mean, there's so many different facets of this. It's not just A or B, black or white type answer. There's so many gray areas in the middle, and I don't know. We have talked about health and safety before. We've talked about sustainability before in food and beverage tourism, and I think we could do a whole conference on this actually. So we do need to wrap up today, but I would like to thank you both very much for taking the time to discuss with us. It's so great to see you both. Lyra, it's been a couple of years, and I was so excited when your book came. Wow, it's like, wow, this woman really knows what she's talking about. It was amazing. And Janet, I just adore our conversations. I loved meeting you in London a year and a half ago, and look forward to the next time that we can get together in any of our countries. So
That would be
thank you
great.
again. Stay
Let's
safe.
do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna say that Lyra has me all excited. No, I'm gonna have to go come to Belize just to try the what is it, the dollar what?
Dalawap.
Dalawab. Dalawab.
Dalawap.
Dollar.
Well, I have never been to Jamaica, and that's something
No,
that I
no,
need to remedy as well.
definitely, definitely. Well, you have a home here, so likewise, Eric.
Thank you very much, Janet. And next month, I'd like to invite our audience to attend on Tuesday, November 17, where we're going to be talking about the future of education and gastronomy tourism and what that means, especially because of pandemic and online learning. So hopefully you all can join us next month for that. So thank you again, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Eric. This has
Thank
been
you,
fun.
Eric.
Bye, Lyra.
Thank
Bye
you, everyone.
bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.